Hey everyone, this is Liz from Thrust Flight, and today we're going to be talking about the Soft Field Takeoff. We'll show you how to perform it and some of the common errors students make.
All right, next up what we're going to demonstrate is a soft field takeoff. So just like our soft field landing, we want to lift off the nose as quickly or as soon as possible at as slow as an airspeed as possible so that the nose wheel doesn't dig itself into a soft field, grass or mud or something like that. So this, just like short field, this requires, let me put this back to takeoff trim, 10 degrees of flaps. What we're going to do is we taxi out to the runway. When we line up for the runway, we're going to pull back, hold back the yoke as far as it can go. We're going to add full power. As we add full power, the airplane's going to want to buck back, so we need to release just a little bit of yoke, a little bit of pressure. We are going to accelerate, and right at the point where the nose starts to lift off the ground, we're going to hold that nose off the ground, or let a little bit of yoke out to hold that nose off the ground and accelerate to our minimum speed, our unstick speed. When we get off the ground, we're going to maintain within one wingspan of the ground to ride our ground effect and accelerate to VX, which is 62. We're going to climb out at 62. Once we're above the obstacle, we'll climb out to 74, and 200 feet above the runway, we'll lift up our flaps.
Okay. So as he mentioned, this takeoff is to be performed on something other than a hard surface. So we're not taking off on concrete, we're not taking off on asphalt, right? It's going to be sand, mud, snow, grass, something soft. So this brings a lot of friction on your airplane as you're rolling down through grass or sand compared to rolling down the runway on concrete. So we change our takeoff because of that. We're also trying to protect the airplane from incurring any damage. So we want our takeoff to look like this. You're rolling down the runway with the nose in the air, and that you lift off from the ground as quickly as possible. That I'm off the ground and actually flying above it even before your normal rotate speed. So we're going to show you how to accomplish that, but that's the end goal with this takeoff. So all of the pre-takeoff actions should be the same. I still want to do my before takeoff checklist. I still want to make sure that I make proper radio calls and the proper run-up checks on the aircraft. You'll want to set the aircraft in the manufacturer's approved setting for soft field takeoffs. In the Cessna 172 we're flying today, that's going to be 10 degrees of flaps. And your aircraft, it might be 0 flaps or a different flap setting, so make sure you're familiar with that. So we've got 10 degrees of flaps in with this aircraft, and we're going to be pulling out onto the runway, doing the pitch and power settings that Lan mentioned. Full back elevator pressure as we're rolling onto our soft surface, then applying full power like in a normal takeoff. So let's see how he performs it, and we'll break it down a little more.
Okay, sound good?
Yep.
All right, let's make a call. Rockwell traffic, thrust 44, taking 17, will be departing pattern, Rockwell.
So you can see already, if you look down in this bottom view, he's got the yoke all the way pulled back into his lap. Full back elevator pressure, even before he's on the runway. That's the proper technique that we want to see used.
Okay, so we got time, so let's get set up. Flaps are 10. We're lined up on the runway.
Okay, if you notice here as he lines up on the runway, he's not using any brake pressure. That's another important step of this soft field takeoff, is that when I apply the brakes in my aircraft, you get a little bit of forward momentum, and that's what we're trying to avoid, if you remember. We want to keep that nose wheel as high as possible and as light on the ground as possible. So right now, the nose wheel is still touching the ground in our configuration, but we don't want any of that forward momentum or increased pressure, so he's not using brakes as he lines up with the center line.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hold full elevator pressure back. As I add in full power, you'll notice the bucking, so I'm gonna let it loose a little bit. There it goes.
If you watch his hands in this bottom view, he says, I've got full back elevator pressure, I'm gonna apply full power, and you'll see the bucking is the term he uses, but essentially the airplane pops a wheelie, right? He applies full power and immediately the nose wheel lifts off the ground, and so what we're concerned about is if you look here, the nose wheel lifts off the ground, look what comes closer to the ground, your tail. We don't wanna have a tail strike on this takeoff. So it depends on the loading for your airplane. The plane Lan and I were flying in this video has an air conditioner in the rear baggage compartment, which makes it extremely tail heavy or an aft center of gravity. So we do need to release a little pressure to prevent it from becoming a tail strike. In your airplane, maybe the center of gravity is a little further forward and you can maintain full back pressure. It's just going to depend on the loading for your plane. We want to have as much as possible without a tail strike.
Maintain directional control. Needles up, gauges green, airspeed alive, center line control.
Okay, so look here, you can see the nose wheel is in the air, the main wheels are on the ground. That's exactly what we want. He's rolling down the runway, literally popping a wheelie, the nose wheel's in the air like this, and he's watching his airspeed and making sure that we're staying on the center line of the runway. That's a really common error we see for students that are learning this takeoff for the first time, is that we forget to put in our crosswind corrections, or we fail to apply the adequate rudder corrections to maintain the center line.
Nose coming up, we're gonna hold it. We're unstuck, so I'm gonna push over a little bit to maintain ground effect.
I'm watching this top view on the screen, and I really want you to see the change in the sight picture for the pilot. That's gonna be the key to performing it properly. So imagine we're sitting on the ground like this, main wheel's on the ground, nose wheel in the air, the airplane lifts off. So we've just risen into the air, and he's gonna push the plane over to fly in ground effect. So see the sight picture change from a nose up attitude, I'm looking at mostly sky, to now I can see I'm level with the horizon and I'm holding altitude over the runway. I don't wanna continue climbing. Let's play that. We'll play that and then I'll break it down. Right there, you see how he's level with the horizon. Okay, so let's talk about why I want to stay in ground effect really quickly. Ground effect is defined as an area of increased performance and decreased drag that's one wingspan above the ground. So if you look at this airplane, we're talking about this distance from the ground, one wingspan. It's most effective a half a wingspan above the ground. So I really want to stay close to the surface. I don't want to climb out of that wingspan because I'm going to get decreased performance. Essentially, my airplane is flying at too slow of a speed. It's not supposed to be flying here, but because I have increased performance in that area really close to the ground, it's physically possible to. So we want to stay there till we build a safe airspeed to exit that area of increased performance, or exit ground effect. So if you notice, land does a really good job of keeping close to the ground and holding level, not increasing in altitude at all. That's a place where we see a lot of students make errors when they're first learning this takeoff, is keeping the altitude consistent and not gradually climbing out of it. It takes some forward pressure on the elevator, usually more than you anticipate. So what speed do we accelerate to? The Airman Certification Standards say that you're supposed to accelerate in ground effect to either VX or VY and then establish a climb at that airspeed. So today land chose VX, 62 knots, which is excellent to climb out at. You could also choose your VY airspeed in your airplane and climb out at that speed. They keep you to a pretty tight standard on that airspeed. For the private pilot, you get +10, -5 knots, and for the commercial pilot, you get +5, -5 knots. So whichever speed you choose, VX or VY, you've got to hold it consistently as you leave ground effect.
62, let's climb out. At 62, let's trim it up a little bit.
He's adjusting pitch quite a bit here to hold 62 knots. As he comes out of ground effect, the airplane's still accelerating, so he has to increase pitch even more to hold that airspeed. That's a skill you may have practiced on your normal takeoffs or on your short field takeoffs. It still applies here.
Okay. Looks like I'm over my obstacle, so we'll trim it out to 74. And looks like we're coming up on 200 feet AGL, so flaps are coming up. And nose is over, so we'll have to pitch it back to 74.
Okay, so one more really common error we see on the soft field takeoff that we haven't talked about yet, right? The student is climbing out at the appropriate airspeed and they have flaps in their airplane. A lot of students will forget to raise the flaps. They're like, whew, I've accomplished a soft field takeoff. What's next, Mr. Examiner, on my check ride? And they forget I haven't fully cleaned up from that maneuver yet. I still have to raise the flaps. So build in a procedure for yourself. Maybe it's checking flaps are up at a certain altitude every single takeoff, or maybe it's checking flaps are up before turning crosswind on every takeoff, even if you didn't do a shorter soft field. But you want to make sure that's not an overlooked item.
And that's how you perform a soft field.
And land says it, that's how you perform a soft field takeoff. So that wraps up our video today on soft field takeoffs. If you have any questions, please leave us a comment and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.